we go. Oh, there we go. Wow, it's a writer. John Feinstein has joined us, and John is a distinguished writer.
Mm-hmm.
How many books, John?
Yeah, this book, Tom, is my 50th.
Whoa!
Congratulations!
Thank you. And I think you've interviewed me for every one of the nonfiction books, which is 35, and many of the fictions. So
Wow!
I'm very grateful.
50.
And you were my first interview on my first book.
Wow!
Season on the Brink.
Wow.
So here we are, 112 years later.
Well, I'll continue. I'll continue with the stupid questions. Then it's my favorite thing to do. John, the new book, The Ancient Eight. This is the new one. What's it about?
Right. It is about Ivy League football, Tom. And you might say, well, why would anybody outside of the Ivy League itself be interested in Ivy League football? And you know, I always like to write about people, athletes, coaches who are not rich and famous, who are not Tiger Woods or Michael Jordan or whomever you might want to name, Steph Curry, because I come to believe through my 112 years as a reporter that you don't have to be rich and famous to have a story to tell. And the Ivy League athletes, football players in the case of this book, are bright. They have interesting backstories. They were willing to share them with me. I did 82 interviews with players for this book. And I can honestly say not one of them was a bad interview. They were all smart kids with stories to tell and that they were willing to share. And I grew up on Ivy League football in New York City. Bad Ivy League football because Columbia was terrible.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I still love going to games in what was then Baker Field. Just rode the subway up, the #1 subway up to 215th Street and walked 3 blocks. And always enjoyed writing about Ivy League athletes for the Washington Post because, as I said, they're terrific interviews in most cases. And wanted to do this book. You remember 20 years ago, I did a book called called The Last Amateurs, and it was about Patriot League basketball. And Bob Woodward, who's been my #1 advisor for 40 plus years, said, "Don't do that. Nobody's going to buy it." And I said, I don't care. I want to do it. And it ended up being a bestseller. Not a Bob Woodward bestseller, but a bestseller.
I've always wondered, who thought with Woodward, did Woodward or Bernstein think of Deep Throat as the name of
it was actually Howard Simons, the managing editor, who came up with the name for Deep Throat. He was Woodward's source. Woodward had known him when he was in the Navy. But because he was on Deep Background and because the movie was
Deep Throat was,
he started calling him Deep Throat, and of course that became iconic in our society.
Maybe your editor would like you to title your next book "Behind the Green Door," just to get some good publicity. You're talking about Ivy League football. What? I can think of a quarterback who, a Harvard graduate that had a great career.
Ryan Fitzpatrick, 17 years in the NFL, and a really fascinating, bright guy. Big surprise. But he played for 9 teams and started at one point or another for all 9 teams. He had a very good career. And you can go back to Ed Marinaro, who finished second
Cornell.
in the Heisman Trophy from Cornell. His son is playing for Cornell right now. Not as good as his dad, but he does play for Cornell. Calvin Hill, of course, at Yale. And Brian Dowling, who was a very good quarterback at Yale, but became more famous as the character BD
the cartoon.
in Doonesbury. Because Gary Trudeau was at Yale at the time that Brian Dowling and Calvin Hill played there. And they were part, of course, the famous 1968 Harvard game when Harvard scored 16 points in the last 42 seconds to tie the game. And the Harvard Crimson came up with what I still think is the greatest sports headline in history. Harvard beats Yale 29-29.
Yeah. I'm going to blow your mind. If you answer this question, I'll send you $5.
Oh, okay.
Ready? Wow. Are you ready for this?
Do I have to pay the postage?
This is so obscure. I'm so proud of myself for knowing this. There is a vinyl album out there.
Oh, no.
With the play-by-play of that game on it. Do you remember the name of the guy doing the play-by-play?
Oh, gosh. I've heard that. I don't know if I heard it on a vinyl album, but I've heard the play-by-play.
I don't know if there's anyone anywhere in the world driving around that knows the... Ken Coleman.
Ken Coleman, who was the Red Sox announcer for years and years and years.
Yeah, that's who...
I know who Ken Coleman was, but I did not know he had the call on that play.
Yeah. A vinyl album, probably in a bin in an obscure store somewhere. Before we move back to your book, The Ancient Eight, I wanted to ask you, because both you and Chick, fans of the now Washington Commanders.
Well, I'm a fan. I don't know what John is.
Here we go.
By the way, Chick, Jason told me that you said, I don't like you. I love you.
No, that's not
true. I don't love your football team.
No.
I don't love your football team.
What about now? Danny's gone. Everything's
I
fine.
hate them less.
All right, fair enough.
With Dan gone, they're just sort of another team to me. And I've enjoyed some of their games this year. Jaden Daniels is the real deal.
He's, I hope so. People are saying he might be a little injured more than they're saying right now, but we'll see. Well, I still think the Eagles are going to score as many points as they want tomorrow night before things are done.
I don't think the Eagles are that good. I think they benefited from a weak schedule.
Okay.
But we'll see. We'll see. And unlike when Snyder was the owner, when I couldn't watch the games because I disliked him so much, I can watch the games now.
Oh, well, that's nice.
An improvement.
If you had some kind of a machine that measured what you watch in the course of a year, what sport do you think you actually watch the most?
Either baseball, because there's so much of it, or college basketball.
Which do you enjoy the most?
That's a hard call. I love sitting back and watching a baseball game at night, watching the Mets, and they were fun last season for a change.
Yeah.
But college hoops is where I cut my teeth. College sports have been, my first love as a reporter, whether it's basketball or in the case of the Ivy League, but football. But I do love a quiet night at home, especially now that I'm so old, watching the Mets. And the Mets happen to have the best broadcast team. I have the baseball package, so I'm exposed to all the broadcast teams. And Gary Cohen and Keith Hernandez and Ron Darling are the best. And that's not my Mets bias. That's just true.
If you were a degenerate gambler, how would you be doing?
Badly, I'm sure.
Really?
Yeah, because I always, even though I try not to, when I pick a game in my head, which is where I pick games, my emotions usually get involved. I still think the Jets are going to win the Super Bowl because I'm an idiot.
Would you agree with me that the Jets get a disproportionate amount of radio talk?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. My friends Mike Wilbon and Tony Kornheiser talk about that all the time, that ESPN is obsessed with the Jets and the Cowboys. Yep. And the Jets have to do with being in New York, but right now it's because Aaron Rodgers is there and not doing very well, by the way. But yes, I totally agree with that.
We're speaking with John Feinstein. He is the author of many books, 50 to be precise, and the current one is The Ancient Eight. How many different publishers have you had? Just a handful, right?
It's a good question. Yeah, Macmillan published Season on the Brink. Then I was with Ballard for a while, then Little Brown, and now Hachette. So 4.
Yeah. Now, speaking of Season on the Brink, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you the passing of Coach Knight. Did you have much contact with him post Season on the Brink?
Oh, yeah. We had a fair amount of contact. Some of it was negative and some of it was positive. He didn't speak to me for 8 years after the book came out, and then decided at some point that I had been fair to him. And we had, I wouldn't call it a close relationship, but it was a cordial relationship. He was very helpful to me when I wrote my book on Red Auerbach because he loved Red. And I talked to him for a couple hours about Red. And then, of course, the last few years, he had dementia. So I really wasn't in touch with him.
Yeah. You probably are not aware of this, John Feinstein, but the Toy Hall of Fame yesterday afternoon released the 3 toys that made it. And I just want to let you know that the Pete Rose action figure did not even make the Toy Hall of Fame. Leading to the obvious question. Your thoughts?
Action figure probably bet on baseball.
Your thoughts on Mr. Rose?
Well, he's a sad story. One of the greatest baseball players of all time. Clearly a Hall of Famer based on his play. But people say, well, what he did wasn't so bad. What he did that was bad, Tom, was he lied about it for 20 years. He kept insisting he hadn't bet on baseball and then finally admitted it in order to sell a book when he wrote his autobiography. And I have trouble respecting that. I don't believe people who cheat their sport whether they're steroid users or Pete Rose, should be in that Hall of Fame. I think character should count. And in the Baseball Hall of Fame ballot, because I did vote for a number of years, it says take character into account, unlike with the NFL, where O.J. Simpson is still in the Hall of Fame, where Lawrence Taylor went in spite of all of his drug issues, because there is no character clause in the NFL Hall of Fame.
Yeah. No, I never use the word egregious because I'm not sure what it means. What is the most egregious entry into the Baseball Hall of Fame in your opinion, historically?
Probably Ty Cobb.
Yeah, that would have been my guess.
Yeah.
Hasn't a fair amount of that been debunked though about Ty Cobb?
Not so much, Chick. Some, but
that was actually Josh. But
that's okay.
I love the line in Field of Dreams where Shoeless Joe Jackson says to Kevin Costner, Ty Cobb wanted to go come play with us here, but we wouldn't let him because we all hated the son of a bitch when he was alive.
Oh, that's great. And now John Feinstein's new book is called The Ancient Eight. Now, am I correct in saying you have two books? Is another one coming out soon?
Well, no, I have another one that actually came out in October, and it's different than The Ancient Eight because I was asked by Duke University Press, whose publisher, by the way, I swear to God, is Dean Smith. That's his name.
Oh.
To write a book for the 100th anniversary of Duke, which is this fall.
Your alma mater?
My alma mater, and that's why I did it. And I came up with the idea to write a book about Duke's 5 championships. The book's called 5 Banners. I covered all 5 of those championships. I was around before Krzyzewski was Coach K, when all the boosters wanted to run him off after he's 38 and 47 for his first 3 seasons, and knew him when he was at Army, and we're still friends today. And so it was a fairly easy book for me to write. He gave me contact information for all the players. So I spoke to most of the important players, I think all of the important players involved in the 5 championships and the 13 Final Fours. Unbelievable number. And it was really a labor of love. It was one of the few times I was able to reveal my Duke bias without having 9 million Maryland fans screaming at me. And I do have a Duke bias. I went to school there, and as I said, Krzyzewski's been a friend forever. But I think the book is more about college basketball and how it's evolved in the last 40 years, for better and worse, than it is specifically about just Duke and their wins.
Okay. Do you can answer this question, yes or no. Do you already have your next book topic done?
No. The answer is no. I've been sort of searching around since I finished The Ancient Eight to come up with my next topic. And if you have an idea, let me know. I'm just wondering if your publishers would really like you to do something, you know, for God's sake, write the Tiger Woods book. Here comes Feinstein. They would probably love it. I wouldn't. Tiger obviously would not cooperate. He's only cooperated on one book, and he controlled the content. It was sort of like that really awful ESPN documentary on the Bulls and Michael Jordan a couple summers ago, where Jordan controlled the content. I'm never going to do a book where someone I'm writing about controls the content. That was the great thing about The Ancient Eight. The kids were so willing to cooperate and talk to me. Excuse me, I have to see.
Go ahead. Our guest is sneezing.
Nothing personal.
Okay.
But they were so cooperative, and I had so much access to the teams, to their locker rooms, practices, team meetings, things like that. That's the kind of book I really enjoy doing, and those have been my most successful books, really, dating back to Season on the Brink.
Let me ask this question. In not necessarily your books, but in the realm of sports books, what sport tends to sell the most books?
Well, the old theory is the smaller the ball, the better. And my golf books are certainly proof of that. They've sold very well. Basketball books also sell well. Baseball books, of course, have sold well for years and years and years. George Plimpton wrote a Sports Illustrated piece on that subject, and with the theory that the smaller the ball, the better. And he said, even though the best-selling book of all time is a basketball book, Season on the Brink, but that had more to do with the subject than the author. And Plimpton showed up at the Masters that year, and I was introduced to it. And I said, so, man, I understand you think the success of Season on the Brink had to do with Knight, not with me. And he started stumbling all over the place. Oh, well, I didn't mean anything by it. And I said, well, what did you mean by it? And, of course, he never read the book, so he had no idea whether it was any good or not. He just knew it had sold a lot of copies.
Okay, I have one last question before we let you go, John. I don't want to get political. I just want to know can you verify the recent revelation about Arnold Palmer?
Oh, my.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Really? All right.
So that is indeed true.
That's been legend on the PGA Tour since Palmer was at his peak in the 60s, and I certainly heard about it when I wrote A Good Walk Spoiled.
Wow.
So yes,
Okay.
I can verify it. I can verify
If you had said
about the Ivy League athletes that I wrote about.
If you had said Bob Woodward told me that, I would have sent you $5. I lied. I have one last quick question. When you wrote this book, the Ancient Eight, what did you come away going, wow, I had no idea?
Just how hard it is to be in the Ivy League as an athlete and as a coach. There are so many rules in the Ivy League that don't exist in big-time football, and nobody transfers. I think I said to you that Princeton had their first football transfer last season since 1988, when Jason Garrett transferred from Columbia to Princeton because his dad became the Princeton coach. There are really no NILs. So it's old-time football. That's what I loved about it. There's a purity to it. The kids come, they stay for 4 years, they graduate, they go on to do things outside of football, even though there are usually at least 12 Ivy Leaguers in the NFL. Most of the time when I ask people that question, how many Ivy Leaguers are there in the NFL, they'll say 2, 3. It's more like 12 to 16 most years. Ryan Fitzpatrick, of course, was a star for 17 years in the NFL as a quarterback. You can go back to Ed Marinaro, who should have won the Heisman Trophy in 1971, but didn't because of anti-Ivy League bias even back then. Calvin Hill, Brian Dowling, guys like that. But I think that the big surprise to me was how dedicated these guys were to football. They still got their degrees, went to class, all of that, but football was an important part of their life, and they were sort of dreading the fact that when they graduated, in 95% of the cases, that would be the end of their football careers. They would go on to law school, medical school, Wall Street, whatever. Some even became sports writers, I think.
Okay.
Even at the Ivy League schools. So that was the big surprise to me, the emotion, being on the sideline at the games and the emotion of the players, play in and play out and game in and game out.
Well, good. Well, it's always a pleasure, John. Once again, the new book, The Ancient Eight. I did have one last question. This is a yes or no. Did you do the audio book?
I did. I did do the audio book.
How long did it take you?
3 days.
Okay. Is that incredibly boring to do it?
No, I mean, I love reading my own stuff. It's pretty good.
Because for your next book, we'll help you decide what to do it on. A guy named Chick McGee would like to do the audio version.
No, I don't think. Okay.
Hey, thanks, John. Best to you and your family.
Everything I've ever paid you.
Okay.
Hey, thanks, John.
Double it. Yeah. Okay.
Best of luck with the book. And you're supposed to send me one.
I thought they sent it to you already. I apologize.
Okay.
I asked.
All right. Thanks, John. It's always a great pleasure. Okay. Thank you.